Hi, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this video I wanted to talk to you about the boogeyman. And the boogeyman, for many people, if you're training in self-defense and self-protection, is the person or people that you're mentally training and preparing yourself against. Yep. For many people, thankfully, they never have to face the boogeyman, and the whole thing is just an exercise in being forewarned and forearmed. But for some people, that's a person or a type of people they have to deal with every single day. But regardless, many people that train for a reason, and that reason is to keep themselves safe from bad people or people that do bad things. Now, many of you might know that I used to be a teacher. I used to teach older teenagers, so 14 to 16 predominantly, in the middle of Birmingham and in South Wales. And I used to teach them what's known as a PRU, a pupil referral unit. I've also taught in young offenders institutions and other places like that. So I spent a lot of time working with, in essence, young criminals. And I wanted to get across in video format that by the time you meet your boogeyman, or boogeymen, by the time you meet bad people, you need to understand the distinct and clear advantages many of them will have. You need to understand their formative years and how that will impact how they see and work with the world around them, because that is very, very, very important. So understanding what criminal university looks like, which is schools, young offenders institutions and prisons, adult prisons, these are all places where people begin a mastery of crime, begin understanding how to be a better criminal. So I'm going to speak predominantly from a younger person's perspective here in terms of the PRUs and some things that you might want to know. So one of the main environmental strengths that they've got is just that. Many young people are astutely environmentally aware. They're astutely environmentally aware. Many of them don't have much money, so they tend to walk or they take their bike a lot. They know their area and the area in which they operate intrinsically, better than you ever could. And for a lot of the young people that I worked with, they also operated in postcode gangs. So they would know precisely the areas in which they lived. This road is safe, that road is not safe. That underpass is okay, that underpass is not okay. So they've got a brilliant mapping system of their entire nearby environment. And so if you think about most attacks and most assaults happening, when you're looking to run away or get away, they know the area much, 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 much better than you. 9 times out of 10. So understand that for many young people, it's schooled in violence at a young age and spending a lot of time committing violence on their patch, committing intimidation on their patch. They know it fluently, backwards. We talk about London cabbie drivers and they've got the knowledge, they've burnt London into their hard disk. Same with these young people. They know everything, everywhere, every shortcut, every long way around, they know everything. That's a really important advantage that they have, and you need to be aware that if you're running away, if you're escaping, you need to have a pretty solid idea of where you're going, what you're doing, how you're going to get there. So if you've got a set route to and from work, take the time to understand your routes in and out of work or your routes in and out of town in the best possible way. Try and be as intuitive with that kind of stuff, because they absolutely are. Another thing is their ability to maintain face, their ability to maintain facade, the ability to project emotions they want to project. A lot of the younger people, it was about fear and intimidation. Fear, intimidation was 80% of the pie, and real physical violence about 20% of the pie. And this is really important because that hugely manifests in adult violence. When these young people graduate to the big leagues, they've already got years and years and years of experience projecting into you fear and projecting via them strength, authority, control, disregard for you. So they've already built in and burnt into their neural pathways the best way to make you feel inferior and afraid, and the best way, and this is a really important trick, to G themselves up. We talk about confidence a lot. A lot of these young people aren't confident. If I was to have them, do a public speaking exercise of 60 seconds, some of the hardest gangsters would fall to shit. They'd be absolutely bricking it. It's not. What they get really good at is understanding the act, the drama, the pretense of confidence. So then it builds that confidence and that competence. They're good at that show. They're good at projecting that show. So being able to make you feel inferior, make you feel weak, use words that imply that you've got nothing, that you are nothing, that you are an easy target. They're very good at psychological warfare, and that starts very early for these young people. When they're in year 4, year 5, year 6, by the time they're in year 9, they are masters at understanding your emotions, your weak points, your strong points, and how to put themselves in a predatory state of mind. They can do that because that makes them safer and it makes it easier. So maintaining that is very important. Working with young people, I could see that they got very, very good and very, very switched on to the benefits of ambush and surprise. And as I mentioned in the first part, because they know their environment so well, they're very, very good at attacking people in choke points. They're very, very understanding that you have to take that underpass. You have to cross the road here because that's where the Pelican Crossing is. They know their environment really well. And over years and years and years of mugging, of robbery, of casual assault, of all manner of things, manner of crime, they get very, very good at surprise and ambush. They know where to place them. They know what to do and where to place them in such a way that you can effectively get out without being caught. So you've got to understand that by the time you face an attack, many of these young people will have intuitively learned the best results come from surprise, come from ambush, come from overwhelming you, and doing so in a place with the perfect geography, with the right amount of darkness, with the right amount of escape routes, with the right lack of CCTV cameras, in the most difficult place for police to arrive. This is where you're going to get assaulted. So understand that surprise and ambush, a lot of my students were doing this stealing people's phones. So they'd get themselves in the right situation, they've got a steady stream of kids going to more normal schools, and they'd nick their phones, nick their wallets, nick everything, nick their shoes. Then, as they started to get older, some of that criminality started to turn sexual. They'd be very sexually intimidating to young women coming through. And then it would start to get a bit more violent as well. As they start to get a bit more gang affiliated, they might just kick shit out of you anyway. So they might take your phone, take your wallet, and then batter you, and then film it, and then put it on YouTube. These are things that by the time you come across your personal boogeyman, they've already got a master's in this stuff because they've been doing it so long. It starts year 6, year 7, and you're taxing phone, you're taxing dinner money. But by the time you're an adult, that means that you've been operating effective criminal ambushes for nearly 8 years, 10 years. You're essentially very proficient, very experienced. You've got great knowledge of what works and what doesn't. So again, understanding ambushes and surprise is something that's very burnt into their minds. The power of fear and dialogue, as I mentioned earlier, they've got very, very good ways to use dialogue to make you capitulate very, very fast. One of the things I really enjoyed about teaching those guys was I'd get to understand their pattern. I'd get to understand how they'd go about trying to intimidate others. They'd try and intimidate you as a teacher. If the law came in, they'd try and intimidate the law. They'd try and intimidate people whether that was fruitless or not. So for example, when I'm teaching, I'm a big dude. I'm a big dude that boxes, does judo. A lot of the kids knew not to fuck with me, but they'd still try and fuck with me. You'd get 5 police officers come in after a fight. They know that nothing good's going to come with fucking these police officers off, but they still go for it because they're always trying to push the boundaries of fear and using dialogue as a tool, weaponized words. And they got good at it, and between them you could see how the different gangs and the different groups kind of threatened, intimidated, negotiated with each other. So again, you're thinking from year 7 up to, say, year 11, so ages 10, 11 to 16, these kids have got solid grounding in verbal jiu-jitsu. A lot of us as adults, and we're in the combatives industry, we're looking at communication as a martial art. We're looking to use our words really well. By the time we're doing that, they've already got 10 years of practical experience in it behind their belt. So that's very important. Another factor is a lot of these kids, they're from shit places with shit parents. People that are just shit to them all the time. It's no excuse for them being absolute scumbags, but a lot of them just have been dealt a very shitty card in life. One thing that really helps them combatively is they've learnt to trust no one. No one. I watched a lot of my young people. Soon as they leave the gates, heads are on the swivel. They're looking because they, as people that ambush, they know they can be ambushed. So they're looking everywhere. They're thinking, they're listening, they're aware. You know, the awareness of some of these predatory young people is on par with what you'd see with experienced military contractors, because they're so switched on to violence. They're looking for it everywhere. They're switched on because they need to be. They need razor sharp instinct. They get very wary of people being too close, too near to them. You even see them when they're fighting. They're very aware of who's around them because they expect to get cheap shotted. They expect it to happen. They don't worry it's going to happen. They can pretty much guarantee that a friend of a friend or a bystander or someone else is going to come in. So you see them when they fight or when there's attacks, when there is ambushes. They're really switched on to who's around them and what they're doing. And they're very, very wary of strangers, of people near them at any time. With proxemics, they've got a very good dial. And that's because there's very little trust. They've got reason not to trust, but they've burnt that into their hard disk. They understand at a very, very, very early age the power and benefit of weapons. Now, I spent a lot of my time taking weapons off people in year 7, year 8, year 10. So, you know, you're looking at 11, 12, 13, 15, you know, and these are everything from screwdrivers, Stanley knives, to commando knives that they've nicked off their brother. You know, stupid stuff, zombie knives, what they're called in the UK, you know, big machetes. Stupid, cheap, steel, Chinese crap, but you name it, these kids have got access to it. And the reason that they use them so often is because they work. So they've seen in their mind from their early years of setting ambushes and stealing things that you can only get so far from being physically intimidating. You can only get so many results from being physically intimidating. So I'd find, especially with a lot of my kids, that some of the ones that had their growth spur early, you know, you got some kids that looked like children and some kids that looked and were built like men. And that just happened because people grow at different phases. So that physical intimidation, that was a tool they could use really easily. When it starts to level out, a lot of them then have to start resorting to weapons because the physical advantage is no longer there. You also got to understand, a bit like the boogeymen that you might face later in life, these are not the most well-fed, well-nourished people. You know, a lot of them have shit diets, shit fitness. You know, I've seen them do PE, bag of shit. Most of the kids that people would be scared of, complete bag of shit. You know, couldn't jog a mile for their life. You know, and these are young 14, 15-year-olds. So again, physical fitness is one thing. You know, they rely on being big. A lot of them had an aspiration to be big. But they understood very early that if I have a weapon, I can expedite the time in which it takes for me to get goods from you. I can expedite your fear and your mental collapse. So when I pull out that knife, the opponent mentally collapses, physically collapses. You know, that's a really visceral and addictive power. It's a really addictive power to see someone that could have been a scary fight for you crumble under fear, crumble under psychological stress. That becomes very addictive, and you start to carry the knife. You start to rely on the knife because for them, it's brilliant. It's their first taste of personal power. So you've got to understand that a lot of these guys will carry and use and think about weapons because they get the job done. They get the job done fast, and it gives them a euphoric boost of power. It's a strong thing for them. They're used to the effect of that. And that's where it starts to become an addictive thing for them to have and use. They also have a very, very good fighting instinct for GTD. Get them down. When you look at these younger people and they're starting to build their criminality, build their repertoire, their CV in being little gobshites, they start to understand that a person that's on the floor is a lot less combatively effective than the person that's standing up. So you'll find that a lot of the assaults, and you know, I was watching it, broke up so many of these ambushes, assaults, fights, you know, and they're all different, they've all got a different flavour. So many which relied on essentially a big solid push where guy falls on the ground and then everybody kicks fuck out of him. They get really good at understanding, you know, do I hit you or can I just shove you? Can I shove you? Can we all just jostle you down and then we kick the shit out of you, because then nobody gets punched. You know, nobody on the attacking side gets punched. They get to completely fill this guy in. So understanding, they've burnt into their mind the benefits of getting you down fast. And they're very good at dropping you down fast, at making sure that you're unbalanced, that you get pushed over, you get knocked over. Because then the fight is simple. The fight is simple because you're just kicking in ahead. simple. They love simple. So understand that from ages 10 to 18, they've been schooled and studied in pushing, knocking people down, and then turning it into a one-side asymmetric fight. So by the time that the boogeyman that you might engage with, who's 23, he's already got that black belt fifth dan in a very effective tool that he knows and trusts can work. So for young people, those formative years, they understand what's effective, and they because it works, they do it again and do it again and do it again, and they refine it. They've got a very sound understanding compared to most other people about how the law works. Now, it's not in terms of courtroom legality, but they're very good at understanding the process of policekeeping. They understand how police work, they understand how interviews work, they understand how custody works, they understand how being handcuffed works. They understand all of these things through years and years of trial and error for testing the boundary, testing the boundary, testing the boundary. So that by the time, say, an incident will occurs and police or law may get involved, they're already very savvy as to what to say, what not to say, what to do, and they're already very, very comfortable in that policing environment. They've been in the vans, they've been in the car. If you're a normal person that's never been in a police car, you might start to lose your shit and say things that really ruin your case. Even if you're the party that's being attacked, if you're the innocent party here, your lack of experience comparatively to some of these scrot bags that have grown up learning this stuff by trial and error, you could start to do yourself into some serious jail time, into some serious fines and repercussions, losing your job. Whereas their experience makes them a very tough nut to crack, because their weak points have all been ironed out. They understand the system, they understand the process. So that's a very important thing to understand post-event, that for many of these people, many people in their formative years, their understanding of the law and the processes and the systems of law is actually very good and will likely be superior to yours no matter how much you've studied, because they've seen it from the pointy end. They understand very, very well how to use media effectively. So they know how to use their phone to bring allies, to bring buddies. Those buddies bring in blades. I always say B&Bs are everywhere, blades and buddies. Guys are really, really good at dialing in support, logistical support. So people got to understand that by the time you meet Mr. Bad Guy, he's got the same logistical expertise when it comes to crime as a major corporate business, because he can dial in support from people, cars, weapons, ways to escape. He's got ways to use media to his advantage. So it's something to really think about, that media for those guys is an intuitive tool. They've used it forever, and they can do so very combatively. So their use of media, the ability for it to go from a small fight to a very big fight, from a small assault to a very big assault, can be as simple as a quick WhatsApp, quick Instagram, boom, it's on. And a lot of the people that are doing bad stuff are also recording that bad stuff. So your risk of repercussions, even if you come out on top, people will know what you look like. They might be able to find where you live, what you do. One of the main worries that for a lot of people teaching in young offenders, teaching in Magistrates Prison Services, or indeed in pupil referral units, is as soon as people get a good bead on who you are and where you might live, their ability to find you and therefore manipulate you is quite high. A lot of this, often, there's very few extreme cases, but often it won't result in a physical assault, but mentally they can shut you down by knowing more about you than they should. Knowledge is power. So again, if they've got knowledge about you and where you live and who you might be related to, they can play that, and they're very good at doing that. And they're also very good at understanding when and how to fuck off before law happens, before bystanders come in, before help comes. They're very, very good at intuitively timing when we all need to go. They're very, very good at avoiding cameras. A lot of my kids, no face, no case. That's what they used to say all the time. No face, no case. They dress the same, have hoods the same. They know it'd be extremely hard to prosecute. They're brought up from, age of 10, no face, no case. So they understand the idea of forensics, identification. They know how hard it is for the law to say, well, he had a black hoodie on and a black face mask and black trainers. They know how generic that is. It's very hard. So they understand how important it is to fuck off early, to not get caught, and how to be masked up and appear in such a way that prosecuting afterwards is very, very difficult. The main point I wanted to get across was when you're training in self-defense and when you're training in combatives, you must really, really, really appreciate that the bad people in life that you are going to meet in asocial or some types of social violence, many of those people will be coming off a decade, 15 years of really good, really honed ambush, assault, combat psychology experience. They would never use those terms. They would never appreciate those terms. They couldn't describe it to you in any particularly lucid way. But it's there and it's burnt in and it's very, very well experienced. And you see it throughout that learning experience. You know, I could watch people go through the stages of what is essentially criminal university, learning from brothers and cousins. And as they get older, they add new tricks. You know, for example, I mentioned earlier about the underpasses and phones. Be it the underpass, steal phones, steal phones, steal phones. That's at age 11. By age 13, 14, it's harass and potentially grab that girl. It's take that laptop bag from adults now. You graduate your way through and you raise your levels of crime. So you've got to understand, but by the age in which you might be attacked by an adult, by a dickhead adult, there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of understanding and psychology that they've got that you don't. And no matter how many courses, no matter how many webinars, how many seminars, how many books you read, no matter how many doors you work on, no matter how many, maritime security operations you've been on, those young people have been there and done it every day, and it was their lives. It wasn't a vocation, it wasn't an occupation. They couldn't get out. You can't get out, you can't quit. That is their lives. So do take the time to appreciate how much of a hard target many bad people are, despite their often very physical disadvantages. They're often less fit and less able. Their mental disadvantages, they're often much more stupid, despite my best efforts to make them a little less stupid. Many of them are very, very stupid. So you've got to understand that their physical disadvantages, their mental disadvantages, their social disadvantages, they still find a way through them to be highly, highly effective because they are so schooled, so experienced, and that is gradual. So every time you imagine the boogeyman, don't just disregard him as just a complete scrap bag. Understand that your boogeyman, in your mind, has graduated from the university of being a proper horrible hard cunt. He's graduated from that university. He's come out of it probably with a master's. So when you deal with him, you have to have a healthy respect for people that are bad. You have to have a healthy respect for bad people. In the same way that armed forces have to have a healthy respect for terrible groups like the IRA, like the Taliban. You have to healthily respect the prowess and the expertise. You must do so as well when it comes to crime and understanding the formative years of criminals. So I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions, please do ask. I've seen a lot and done a lot with young offenders, with pupil referral units. I do hope that some of them are living long, happy, fruitful and prosperous lives, but do understand that the person that you see and the person you train against and the person you're trying to safeguard yourself against comes with decades of history of doing bad stuff, doing it very well, and learning it from others. So never ignore and never underestimate the power of ghetto university knowledge. Cheers.